The Tower of London is not only the emblem of a capital city, it's a gigantic jewel box which contains one of the most fabulous treasures in the world. Inside these glass cases are the crown jewels of the sovereigns of England, preserved here for the last 7 centuries. Crowns, scepters, diadems, all richly adorned with stones of inestimable value and legendary fame. All are full of history. Some of the jewels have traveled around the world and have known epic adventures involving love, violence, and politics. Today, these crowns, supreme symbols of the monarchy, most often reign behind their bulletproof glass cases, offering astonishment to those who visit. Only a few of these English crown jewels leave the jewel house on great occasions. As, for example, the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II on the 2nd of June, 1953.
My name is David Thomas. I'm a crown jeweller here at Garrod, and I joined the company in 1986. Garrod was first created or established, I should say, in 1735, but it wasn't until 1843 that Garrod became then crown jewellers to Queen Victoria. The title comes from the sovereign, and it is an act of parliament that there has to be an individual crown jeweller to have the responsibility of the care and maintenance of the crown jewels in the Tower of London. The sovereign is the only one that's allowed to touch the crowns. But there is a rule set down again at the opening of Parliament, the crown jeweller being the only one that's allowed, has to be there when the showcases are open, is the only one that's really allowed to touch the crowns. The first time when I took over the job in 1990, I was on my own. And yes, I was terrified, absolutely terrified, holding these pieces, this great history, this great diamond, the finest 2 diamonds in the world, Cullinan 1 and 2. I have a workshop within the jewel house at the Tower of London. It's right underground, and so all the repairs, well, I wouldn't say repairs because they don't really need repairing, but conservation, cleaning, dusting will take place within the jewel house. They're not allowed to leave. Obviously, for security reasons, we can't do that. I mean, even though we're behind bars, we're locked into the jewel house, I still have 4 armed guards that are with me all the time. 2 will look at the doors outside to make sure nobody comes in. 2 are inside with me, and they will follow me everywhere. They have to be with me all the time.
I'm the chief exhibitor, which primarily means that I'm primarily responsible for the crown jewels, for their safety and also the presentation. So I manage the staff that form the jewel house staff. They are absolutely the real thing. We have for many years been happy with our security and are confident that we can show the real jewels. At times when people come, they will see a little sign in the cases saying in use, for that best describes what happens. For items of the regalia do go in at various state occasions throughout the year. We've moved them jewels around in various buildings over the years, and each of the times we've enhanced the security from it. So fortunately nobody's been anywhere near us, or we'd like to think they haven't. There has been no attempt on the crown jewel since 1671. Colonel Blood was a character well known in our history, but what was particularly poignant to us here, that in 1671 he carried out a very daring theft of the crown jewels, the only time they've ever been stolen.
The story is incredible. Thomas Blood began by making friends with the man who guarded the treasure, Talbot Edwards, little by little winning his trust. One day he arrived with 4 men and asked Edwards' permission to admire the crown jewels. Once in the jewel room, Blood knocked out the guard and then stabbed him. One of his companions crushed the crown so that it would fit into a sack. The second man stuffed the globe into the top of his breeches. The scepter, too long to fit into the sack, was sawed in 2. But just as the thieves were ready to flee, Edward's son surprised them and raised the alarm. Blood and his companions were arrested.
But as a result, Colonel Blood was taken into custody. Whilst in custody here at the Tower, he wrote to the King and he asked permission to have an audience with the King. And surprisingly, this was granted to him. And so he was taken away down to Westminster where the King awaited. The audience he had was on a one-to-one basis, in that he went in to see the King. On coming him out, he held with him a letter of authorization signed with the King's own fair hand. It stated that Blood was to be promoted to be Captain of the Guard.
The Tower of London is a concise reflection of English history. Over the centuries, this fortress, built by William the Conqueror in 1066, has been put to many uses: royal residence, arsenal, menagerie and prison. It was also the place of execution for many crowned heads, notably Anne Boleyn. The royal insignia have been moved many times within the Tower of London, finally finding an ideal home in 1971 in the old Waterloo Barracks. This is where one admires them today, inaccessible marvels encased in their glass shrines.
My name is Diana Scarisbrick, and for the last 30 years I have been writing and lecturing on the very specialised subject of jewellery. They're in the Tower of London because they're the great treasures of the English monarchy, and the Tower of London is the safest place for them to be. They can be seen by millions of people every year, and the millions of people who want to see them are fascinated by what they represent. They represent the continuous history of the British monarchy since Anglo-Saxon times, that's the 8th, 9th centuries, up to the present. Crown, of course, is the ultimate symbol. Then you have the other symbols, the scepter, which again shows authority, the bracelets, the virtues of sincerity and wisdom, the swords representing justice, spiritual justice, and temporal justice, and the idea of mercy. It's not for Republicans. It's for people who believe in the idea of a king or a queen who has inherited this particular position to govern. And these objects represent that idea. And because they are so old, they represent the continuous history of the monarchy in England. There are 9 crowns. St. Edward's crown, named after Edward the Confessor, the last of the Saxon kings, which is used for the coronation ceremony. The Imperial state crown, all great state occasions, with the famous historic stones. The Imperial crown of India, made in 1911 for the Delhi Durbar. Then there are the 2 crowns of Mary of Modena from 1685. Then there is the crown of Queen Mary, 1911, the crown of the Queen Mother, 1937 coronation. When Queen Victoria became Empress of India, 1870, a very charming imperial small diamond crown was made for her, that's the 8th. And the 9th is the crown of the Prince of Wales, which is, I think, all gold. So those are the 9 crowns, all on view in the Tower of London.
It's rare that the crowns leave their sanctuary. This doesn't happen except on great ceremonial occasions, historic occasions, such as the crowning of Queen Elizabeth on the 22nd of June, 1953. At a time like this, one does not skimp on magnificence. It's necessary to impress the people who are traditionally invited to this ceremony. It must be an extraordinary, once-in-a-lifetime pageant. Television had just arrived on the scene. Elizabeth, aware of the political and social value of such pomp, authorized live television coverage of the event, and she became, for many years, the most recognized media figure in the world. A monarch needs decorum to assert her authority. And in the choice of royal splendor, she must always outdo her predecessors, or at least try. A crown, a scepter are the emblems of wealth, and therefore of power. So they must be decorated with exceptional stones.
In 1849, as part of the Treaty of Lahore on the annexation of the Punjab, Queen Victoria came into the possession of the great Kohinoor diamond. Now, the Kohinoor diamond came with it a special curse, for it was said that anyone who owned it would die a horrible death.
This diamond that kills originally came from India, where, according to a legend, it brings bad luck to the men who possess it, but not to the women. In any case, this stone passed through many royal hands, including the celebrated Mughals. In 1739, Nadir, Shah of Persia, invaded India and sacked Delhi to seize, among other things, this fabulous diamond. A courtesan having revealed to him that the great Mughal hid the stone in his turban, Nadir Shah invited the monarch to a banquet of reconciliation and proposed, according to Oriental ritual, the exchange of headdresses. The great Mughal couldn't refuse and thus lost his treasure. When he saw this prodigious stone weighing 186 carats, Nadir Shah was carried away by his own enthusiasm and exclaimed, "Kohinoor, O mountain of light." Some years later, Nadir Shah was assassinated. Then new wars shook the Orient and the diamond fell into the hands of the king of the Sikhs. In 1849, the English claimed it after a revolt that broke out in the Punjab. Finally, the all-powerful British East India Company appropriated it and offered it to Queen Victoria. It already sparkled with 1,000 points of light, but the Queen wanted more. She had it recut. No matter that it lost 80 carats, it had to gain in brilliance. And the evil powers of the Kohinoor, they never showed themselves again. But it's true that up until now, it has always been women who have inherited it.
For Queen Victoria, of course, was in her 80s before life surceased her. She then passed the diamond down to her successor, her daughter-in-law, Queen Alexandra. She too made life beyond 80, as did her successor, Queen Mary. It then moved in 1937 and was placed into the new crown that was made for Queen Elizabeth as the wife of George VI. Queen Elizabeth, of course, became the Queen Mother in 1953 and lived on to the year 2002. So her whole life spanned 101 years. So it seems the bad luck for men, which is historically recorded, and the good luck and long life to women is very much a key factor of the diamond's ownership.
I think if the world had to decide on an 8th or a 9th wonder of the world, we in Pakistan would think that the Kohinoor should be regarded as one of the wonders of the world. But as you know, many of the things that belong to us, we were not able to get after colonialism ended. The Kohinoor ranks amongst the most important of what rightfully belonged to us, but we did not get back.
The majority of things in the Tower of London are reserved for the coronation ceremony. There is, however, the Imperial state crown, which is kept for state occasions. The Cullinan too, very magnificent, very large, that is in the centre of the headband of the Imperial state crown.
The Cullinan, a saga in itself. It's the largest raw diamond ever discovered on our planet, and its discovery literally changed the history of South Africa. We're in 1866. The tensions between the Boers, colonists from the Netherlands, and the British government are already on the rise and will eventually lead to the Boer Wars. In the independent state of Transvaal, along the banks of the Orange River, a 15-year-old boy picks up a stone that sparkles more than the others. He brings it to a mineral collector who identifies it without hesitation. It's a diamond, an enormous one. The diamond rush is on. Concessions multiply rapidly in the states of Transvaal and Orange. Cecil Rhodes, one of the great colonial English empire builders, comes to bring some order to it. For the moment, it's a stampede, madness. People are ready to search every square foot with a fine-tooth comb. Cecil Rhodes has no desire for modest pickings. He wants all the diamonds he can get. So he decides to purchase diamond concessions and all the mines in the Kimberley region. Afterwards, in 1888, he founds the famous De Beers Company. 10 years later, this company will control 90% of the world market. When the Second Boer War ends in 1902, all of South Africa has come down with diamond fever. Diamond mines sprout up everywhere, and thousands of people are on the move to become part of this new and promising industry. Starting in 1902, one of the largest deposits is mined near Pretoria, the Premier Mine. Recruitment for workers is non-stop. The crater is enormous. The Premier Mine alone produces as many diamonds as all the other De Beers mines combined. So it's time to take a big step forward, to mechanize, to reorganize. Whether strip mining under open sky or shaft mining underground, or changing the watercourses for placer mining, whatever the means of production, it is always the same people who work and who work hard, the blacks. At the top of the chain, the master usually arrives just in time to collect the fruits of their labor. One evening, as always, Fred Wells, the director of the Premier Mine, is doing his tour of inspection inside the crater, and by chance, he notices a surprising glitter coming from a rock face.
My name is Frank Dippenaar. What I know about the Cullinan diamond is that it was found in Pretoria, in the Premier Mine, and was the biggest stone ever discovered.
It weighs 3,106 carats. A carat is the equivalent of 0.2 grams. So this diamond weighed about 620 grams, truly worthy of a royal scepter.
At the beginning, they didn't believe it to be a diamond, and it was thrown out with the rocks, and it just lay outside. Then somebody walked past it, the service manager, and he thought, but maybe this is not a crystal, maybe this is a diamond. And he took it into the person in charge there of the mine, and he had one look at it and threw it through the window outside.
So how did this vulgar stone end up on a royal crown?
He then went and picked it up, and it was tested, and it then was confirmed that it was indeed a diamond. They named it the Cullinan diamond, and it weighed 3,106 carats.
Mr. Wells was very proud of his find, but in the end, he had to give it back to the owner of the mine, who named it after himself, Cullinan. And after that, they had only just begun. They hoped, of course, to discover a new diamond, maybe even bigger. Until the end of the 20th century, the Premier Mine produced an impressive quantity of diamonds. Some were beautiful specimens. Today, it still belongs to De Beers, who renamed it the Cullinan Mine.
My name is Gerard Eysel, and my job is I'm a shaft boss in De Beers Cullinan Mine. I'm responsible for the maintenance in the shaft operations. This is the old volcano that came out here, and it's measuring 1 kilometer by 800 meters. The mine goes down to 850 meters, and the shaft is going down to 763 meters. The Cullinan diamond was found over there in the corner, 6 meters from surface. Stand by. Ons is by die outlook point. Negatief.
Extreme conditions of temperature and pressure are necessary for carbon atoms to be pressed together to form a diamond the size of the Cullinan. Although it was found only 6 meters under the surface, it was born 200 kilometers under the Earth in 1,000-degree magma. Its crystallization dates from about 1.7 billion years ago.
In the old days, they dig it out by hand, and there were 12,000 people working here, and the operations now is fully mechanized with LHDs, load toll dumpers loading, and we use now 1,200 people.
It was due to incredible luck that the Cullinan diamond was discovered. Nevertheless, in the Premier mine, they continue to hope for more such fortunate discoveries. If another diamond as fabled as the Cullinan were found today, what would happen to it? Whose treasury would it enrich? On what fabulous piece of jewelry would it be encrusted? It might go to the Gulf Emirates, where it would see the light of day for a few hours at most, before being buried again in the vaults of a Swiss bank.
Day we bring out 8,500 tons. We can drive with a vehicle underground, and you can drive for approximately 300 kilometers. And we can take the whole car down in the shaft. It's capable of taking a whole car down underground. Cullinan is known for his big diamonds. We found a centenary diamond here, and we found a millennium diamond here, and a golden jubilee.
The future is looking bright for the celebrated De Beers. The same can't be said for the miners. When one of them finds a diamond on the ground, he is supposed to cover it with his hand and immediately inform a superior. As a reward for his honesty, he is paid a certain percentage of the sale of the stone. The owners of most of the mines obviously are afraid that too many miners can't resist temptation. Perhaps this is one reason why they have automated their operations to the fullest. Of the 1,200 people employed by Cullinan, few of them ever see the precious stones. At the end of the production chain, they're only handled by the sorters who remain under close surveillance. "90% of diamonds cannot be used for jewelry, and of the remaining 10%, the majority weigh only a few carats. And when one finds a diamond weighing 620 grams like the Cullinan, what does one do with it? Thomas Cullinan's wife would have willingly kept it, but she had to content herself with a small pendant, which her husband had made for her from the most beautiful diamonds from his mine. He had in fact decided to sell the Cullinan, but it was still necessary to find a buyer. Meanwhile, the largest diamond in the world was kept for many years in a Cape Town bank, hidden away in a hat box. In 1907, General Botha, the former commander-in-chief of the Boer army that fought England, became mayor of the Transvaal. The war was over, and it was time for reconstruction and to obtain the support of the British Empire. As a pledge of reconciliation, Botha offered the Cullinan diamond to King Edward VII for his 66th birthday. A gift, perhaps not a poisoned gift, but certainly a poisonous one, given the political context. But the king accepted it, and not long after, the British Parliament would grant Botha a substantial budgetary increase.
This is a replica of the Cullinan diamond. It was found in January 1905, 3,106 carats. That's approximately 600 grams. It was the biggest diamond ever found in the world, which is really incredible because it was a pure white gemstone. It was bought by the Transvaal government, General Botha, and it was presented to King Edward in 1908. They got the diamond to the UK by an elaborate hoax, actually. They made a replica just like this, and they guarded it on the train to Cape Town, and then by steamboat to the UK, but it was actually a hoax. It was a copy. The real diamond went by post from this post office in the village to England, and that's how they got the diamond to England. It was a big hoax.
In fact, the two diamonds travelled on the same boat, the real one among the postal packages and its copy in a safe, guarded by Scotland Yard agents.
Les frères Bram
The
et
two
Joseph
brothers, Bram and Joseph,
allé à
went to
Londres
London to
pour
look at the
regarder
Cullinan
le
and to
Cullinan
take it back to
et pour
Amsterdam.
l'emmener à Amsterdam.
In Holland,
Dans tous les
all the
journaux en
newspapers
Hollande,
said
c'était
that the
écrit que
English were sending
les
a
Anglais
destroyer
ont
from
envoyé un
London
destroyer
to
de Londres à
Amsterdam to carry
Amsterdam
the Cullinan to
pour
Amsterdam.
porter le Cullinan à Amsterdam.
In
En
reality, it
réalité,
was my
c'était mon
grandfather who
grand-père
carried the
qui
Cullinan
a mis
in his
le
pocket.
Cullinan dans sa poche. Dans
In
une
one
poche,
pocket, the
le
raw
Cullinan
diamond,
brut, dans
and
l'autre
in the
poche,
other, a revolver.
un revolver, mais il a
But he forgot to
oublié
take
de
pocket money.
prendre un peu d'argent. Alors, il a pris le bateau de Londres à
He
Amsterdam
boarded the
avec
boat
le
from
Cullinan,
London to Amsterdam
avec une
with
valeur
the
comme
Cullinan, with a value of
incroyable dans la
incredible
poche,
value,
pas un sou.
but he didn't have a penny in his pocket.
Et il a amené le Cullinan à Amsterdam.
And he took the Cullinan to
mis
Amsterdam
ici
and
dans
put
le
it in the
safe au
office
bureau.
safe.
Et le destroyer
And the
n'est
destroyer
jamais
never
arrivé.
arrived.
Moi, je suis
I'm
Edward
Edward
Asscher.
Asscher.
Je travaille
I've worked
ici
here since
depuis
1970.
1970, alors 36
years
ans. Et
I'm the
je
great-grandson
suis le
of Bram Asscher, who
grand-fils
was
de
responsible
Bram
for the
Asscher,
Cullinan diamond.
qui a été
with his brother,
responsable pour
who
le
cut
Cullinan,
it.
avec son frère qui a clivé le Cullinan. Vers la fin
Towards the
de
end of the
ce
19th century,
siècle,
De Beers had
De
asked
Beers
them to cut
lui
the
a
Excelsior.
demandé de tailler
And the
l'Excelsior.
Excelsior
Et
was the
l'Excelsior, à ce
largest
temps-là,
known diamond at that
était
time.
le diamant le
So
plus grand.
we cut the Excelsior.
Alors la maison Asscher a taillé
And a few
d'abord
years later,
l'Excelsior
the
et
Cullinan.
quelques ans plus tard le Cullinan.
Needless to say, during this operation, the Asscher brothers' diamond-cutting workshop was placed under high surveillance. And for this most precious object in the world, they had an armoured safe specially built. Now came the time for careful consideration. What to do with this mythical stone? First problem, nothing in the workshop was capable of cleaving it. It would be necessary to have a tool specially made.
On a étudié, discuté avec les 5 frères.
Studied it.
Et après, on a
discussed it
décidé
among
de
the 5
cliver le Cullinan 2
Then
fois.
we decided
La
to cleave
première
the
fois,
Cullinan
c'était
twice.
le
first
couteau
time, the steel
d'acier
knife
qui
broke.
est cassé. Alors, la
second
deuxième
time, it
fois,
cleaved
il a
the stone.
clivé la pierre.
To cleave is to put a steel blade on the weakest point of a stone and give it one sharp blow so that it splits apart.
Il y a une histoire
There's a story
que
that he
lui
fainted
était
after the
évanoui après le clivage. Mais ça, c'est une
That's
histoire de
fabrication.
presse. Un vrai Asscher,
A real Asscher, even on such a big
même
stone,
pour une grande pierre, donne
would
pas
never
de
have trouble
problème pour
cleaving.
le cliver.
To put it modestly, this was the diamond cleavage of the century. Here is the Cullinan, transformed into 9 large stones and 96 small ones. The King of England kept the 2 largest and left the others to the House of Asscher as payment. These were then resold to the state of Transvaal, which again offered them to Edward VII. After this waltz of the diamonds, England finally found itself in possession of the 2 stars. The Cullinan II, the second star of Africa, which weighs 317.40 carats, was added to the Imperial crown. And the number 1, the great star of Africa, the largest white diamond in the world, ornaments the royal scepter of England with its 1,000 points of light. It's pear-shaped and weighs more than 530 carats. To transform a large stone into an exceptional jewel, even if it is utterly pure, is more than an art. The know-how to accomplish this borders on magic. And Gabi Tolkowski remains today the great magician in this realm.
Je m'appelle Gabriel Tolkowski, connu sous le nom Gabi. On m'a confié des devoirs taillés de diamants qui sont devenus diamants historiques. Ce sont diamants excessivement grands. En 1906-1907, quand M. Asscher a présenté finalement cette pierre extraordinaire, le Cullinan, c'est sa main qui a produit la beauté. C'est l'individu qui s'appelle le diamant et l'individu qui s'appelle l'homme. Ils se sont compris. Et quand on parle avec les diamants, parce qu'on en parle avec, on dit à chacun, on dit chaque fois, qu'est-ce que tu voudrais devenir? Et la réponse est, je voudrais devenir la plus belle. Et on doit tricher, parce que chaque fois, on doit promettre à dire, tu seras la plus belle. Effectivement, chacune est la plus belle pour quelqu'un. J'ai reçu pour la première fois ce diamant entre mes mains. C'est la vraie grandeur. Je n'ai pas osé le toucher. Et c'était quelque chose de tout à fait hors proportion. Ça n'arrive pas dans la vie de l'homme. Et quand ça arrive, c'est tellement exceptionnel qu'il faut vraiment être fou. Cette pierre, il faudra la garder comme une pierre entière, ne pas la partager en plusieurs pierres. Je ne veux pas utiliser des machines pour scier la pièce. Je ne veux pas utiliser les lasers pour brûler la pièce. Mais la force du poignet, c'est tellement faible que ça ne peut pas nuire. On ne peut pas casser le diamant à la force du poignet. La vie d'un homme qui reçoit cette responsabilité est une vie d'ermite. Il fallait que je change mon nom parce que les journalistes me cherchaient. Il fallait que je trouve des fabricants d'outils de précision parce qu'il n'y a pas d'outils pour cette grandeur-là. Ça n'existe pas. On ne peut pas aller au magasin pour les acheter. La vraie chose qui était la plus difficile, c'était à découvrir quelle forme aura ce diamant. Et comment est-ce qu'il sera celui qui sera le plus beau, ou celle qui sera la plus belle? Il n'y avait qu'un modèle qui sera le plus imposant, le modèle que j'ai appelé le turban. Voilà. Moi, je me rappelle que je me suis dit que je ne terminerais jamais. Même que la DBS a envoyé un directeur spécial pour me dire « Gabi, il est temps de terminer », je dis « je ne peux pas ».
What do you mean you can't?
Ça veut dire tu peux pas.
I mean I can't.
Diamant ne veut pas.
The diamond doesn't want to be
tombé amoureux de nous.
It has fallen in love with us.
Je me suis dit,
I said to myself, either I'm going crazy or I'm simply ignorant.
Ou qu'on est simplement des ignorants. Alors je me suis dit, je vais faire un test. Et pour la première fois en 3 ans, j'ai invité les enfants de tous ceux qui travaillaient avec moi et je les ai demandé de venir à l'atelier pour voir la pierre. Et j'ai pris la pierre qui était dans un état presque fini et je l'ai posée par terre sur le tapis. Et ces enfants se sont baissés, agenouillés et commençaient à rigoler. Et moi, mes oreilles sont devenues rouges comme des tomates. Parce que les enfants, quand ils rigolent, cela veut dire que c'est rigolo. Rigolo, peut-être c'est idiot. Peut-être c'est tout à fait aberrant. Peut-être c'est tellement grave que je ne pourrais pas le montrer à d'autres gens. Peut-être j'ai failli. J'ai pas réussi. Et je demande à la fille, je n'oublierai jamais, je demande à la fille de 12 ans, je dis, mais pourquoi est-ce que vous rigolez? Et en anglais, elle a répondu, we laugh because the diamond is smiling. Le diamant sourit. Et je savais que ça réussissait.
If you look at the diamond, I've only seen replicas of it, of course, but the one side looks like it was shed, as if it's been cut or broken away from another stone. And the belief is that the stone that was attached to it was bigger than the Cullinan that was recovered.
Some people say that diamond was part of a bigger diamond, that it was actually broken off. Is that true? Or that they found the other part
No, they've never found the other part. The experts at that time, when the diamond was found in 1905 by Fred Wells, quite a few experts actually looked at this diamond and said, yes, it was part of a bigger diamond. Whether that's true or not, modern-day experts now seem to think it wasn't part of a bigger diamond, but there has been rumours, actually, that some people actually saw the other half. In fact, there was a guy who was actually executed. He said that he had the other half, but he was hung before he could tell anybody where it was.
So nobody knows where it is?
Nobody knows now, no.
There is nothing like a whiff of mystery to nourish myths and dreams. The two Cullinan diamonds couldn't have found a more dignified home to reveal their splendor. Nevertheless, even their royal pedigree didn't shelter them from human greed.
I actually went to the Tower of London a couple of years ago, and I explained I was from Cullinan in South Africa and that we'd like the diamond back, but they said they didn't think the Queen would actually allow that. But there are people in this village of Cullinan and South Africa who really would like to see this diamond back in this country.
In 1649, we had what we call our parliamentary or Commonwealth period. During that time, agents of Oliver Cromwell were sent here to the Tower with orders to destroy the baubles of majesty that were no longer required. So as a result, the crowns of the day were dissembled, the gold was melted down, and the stones also stored away. Some 11 years later, on the cessation of our civil war and the end of parliamentarism, we had restoration. And as a result, they then set about remaking the crown jewels. But they used the original plans, so that what we have today is very much in the same make as what it was many years ago. There are, of course, many ghost stories here in the Tower. We have seen many times people have recorded seeing all kinds of ghosts. The jewel house now, of course, is a very modern building, so we may have burnt out the previous ones from when we rebuilt it in 1845. But of course, across the Broadwalk, we have seen Queens of England who will have at one time worn crown jewels and coronation regalia. For example, Queen Anne Boleyn is often seen here in the Tower. They say that her head is tucked underneath her arm, and as a result there have been even songs written about such things. One dark winter's night in 1841, the man in the Voillot Tower had failed to take his furnace fire down completely, and as a result, some couple of hours after he'd left to go home, it caught light again and then set fire to the building. It subsequently set fire to the Grand Storehouse. Now, the jewels at the time were held in the Martin Tower, which is to the east of this building, and they were very close to it. The fire was so intense in the Grand Storehouse that they worried about the crown jewel safety. They thought they'd better move them. We had our own Tower policeman at the time, and he was the one who was at the front, and he broke into the cases, and he was handing the jewels out, and they were taken to the White Tower for safety. They say that by the time he got the last of the items of the regalia safely out of the cage, his clothes were actually on fire and were singeing away.
One would think that the crown jewels of England would be protected by some sort of magic spell. None of the ghosts who inhabit the Tower of London would ever dare to take them. The jewels were still intact after the Civil War, and they were miraculously spared from the flames that would have seriously damaged them. Sumptuous, insolent, the crowns are still there. As for their little sisters, the tiaras, there are many of them, but few are ever displayed for the public to admire. The most famous of these is the Baltimore tiara.
The Baltimore tiara was made by Garrard in 1870. It was made for Lord Baltimore, and Lord Baltimore was the treasurer to Queen Victoria, so it was a Garrard piece.
My name is François Curiel. I'm an auctioneer at Christie's, and it's in this capacity that I'm in charge of the sale of Princess Margaret's jewelry. The reason this event is very special is that it is very rare for members of the royal family to sell their jewels. One of the most outstanding objects at this sale is the Baltimore tiara. Every auctioneer specializing in jewelry dreams of someday auctioning the Cullinan. But should we keep on dreaming about something that is so unlikely to ever happen?
Cullinan 1 and 2, they're called the large stars of Africa. Those two permanently could not be sold. They are, the word is inalienable. They cannot be separated from the institution of the crown. And the other 7 are in 2 brooches, in a ring, as a smaller pendant and as a large pendant, and they belong to the Queen, her personal property. And if there was a terrible disaster with the English royal family, I do not see any reason why whoever inherited them should not be able to sell them.
This is precisely the case with the jewels of Princess Margaret, the Queen's younger sister. Princess Margaret had an inordinate love of jewels, and the Queen Mother, her grandmother, loved to spoil this most unruly child of the royal family. Nothing was too beautiful or too extravagant for the romantic and capricious young princess. But, however great the king, he is human as ourselves. Margaret's children, for financial reasons, had to put a part of these treasures up for sale, including the famous Kohinoor tiara.
400,000 pounds, but it's here by me at 400. 420,000. Sold to you, madame. Thank you very, very much.
So as we all know, it's now been sold at the sale room yesterday for a vast sum of money. I think the reserve on it was something about 200,000. I think it went for just under $1 million. All of the crowns have got a very interesting history, but the most important one, I think, is the Imperial State Crown, because it's got so many wonderful stones in with so much history. The Black Prince's ruby, for instance, which is not a ruby but a spinel, everybody knows it's the finest spinel in the world. It's drilled all the way through. Drilled all the way through because it was worn on a leather thong around the neck, but it was also worn by Henry V at the Battle of Agincourt in 1415.
But who was this Black Prince? He was the son of Edward III of England. He distinguished himself at the Battle of Nájera, 1367, when he fought at the side of Pierre I of Castile. The King of Castile gave him a red ruby to thank him. The stone was added to Henry V's crown some 40 years later. During the Battle of Agincourt, which pitted England against France, the Duke of Alençon struck Henry a mighty blow with his axe. An incredible stroke of luck. The blade of the axe was deflected by the red stone. It is said that the ruby still bears the mark. The ruby of the Black Prince is actually a spinel, that is, a stone whose chemical composition is close to the ruby but less valuable. An imposter of sorts, because in those days it wasn't possible to chemically analyze a stone. The merchants did simple tests that often resulted in errors. This was mentioned in the writings of Marco Polo and Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, the great traveller and gem merchant who was received at the court of the sultans and of the great Mogul. He writes that already in the epoch of Tamerlane in the 14th century, the kings of the Orient were insatiable collectors of rubies and spinels. These red gems on which they engraved their names were resplendent on turbans, crowns, and thrones. Some spinels had many centuries of history behind them, and these histories were often as turbulent as those of the kings of the Orient themselves. The Black Prince's ruby came from Badakhshan, in the center of what is now Tajikistan. Tamerlane often invited the king of Badakhshan to his court in Samarkand and had the spinel mines guarded by his own soldiers. How did these spinels get from the dark caverns to the farthest reaches of the known world? By traveling the Silk Road. This was how, in the 14th century, the ruby of the Black Prince was sold to the Moorish king of Granada, who was assassinated by the king of Castile shortly after, and who stripped him of his treasure. And it was this same king who offered it to the Black Prince. All of these events would probably have greatly amused those who discovered the stone. The mine where it was found is called Kohinoor, the mountain of precious stones. It nestles 2,800 meters in altitude in the Pamir Mountains in Tajikistan.
The Kohinoor deposit is more important historically than geologically. Its history began about, there's no precise date, of course, but let's say between the 7th and 9th centuries. The proof is that the mines are very old. There are more than 410 still existing today. Tomorrow, God willing, we're going to visit the oldest mine in the world, known as the 410th, that was worked from the 7th until the 16th century. It's there that they found the spinel that was called the ruby of the Black Prince, and that was given to Elizabeth. It's very red.
This is it, Spinel the Impostor, the stone that passed for a ruby on many royal crowns. It is very hard, which makes it useful for all kinds of jewelry. Which explains its popularity among the rich and famous. The different mines of Badakhshan exported spinels everywhere, as far as Asia and the Far East, as well as to the west. Today again, the Kohinoor mine is worked in utter secrecy, perhaps an old habit of the Soviet regime. In any case, the mine is only accessible a few months out of the year, because in the winter, the Pamir Mountains are covered with 3 meters of snow.
What is left is the central zone. All the things at the bottom of the map are deposits that were exhausted long ago. Around here is the principal deposit of the Kohinoor.
In the era when the ruby of the Black Prince was discovered, there was a legend that the mines were inhabited by monsters who worked day and night without ever emerging from the dark tunnel. Today, nobody still believes this fable, but everything possible is done to maintain the mystery surrounding the Kohinoor. Between the 9th and the 19th centuries, 40 shafts were dug here with mallet and chisel, and in the past, work was done in a prone position. The Soviet regime modernized production by introducing the pneumatic drill and dynamite. No foreigner can approach the Kohinoor mine. The Tajik authorities do not allow it. Like the spoils of war, the spinels are extracted and transported by special services to the capital, Dushanbe. A tiny part of the production is exported to Europe. Russia appropriates the rest. Most of the old shafts have been closed for security reasons. They're in danger of caving in. But a new topographical survey is envisioned to see if new ones can be opened. The spinels produced from the Voillot mine are the most beautiful in the world. Naturally, this makes one wonder if this mountain isn't hiding one stone that is even more remarkable. Here too, one always hopes to find the exception, a spinel as big as an egg that surpasses all the others, and that would be worthy of the crown of a queen. Once a year, at least, the splendid Royal Crown of England plays its most noble role, the ceremony of the opening day of Parliament, presided over by the Queen in full regalia. The jewels are there. The emblems of power for some, symbols of beauty for others. But in the end, what fascinates us most about these marvels is that they possess what we lack: eternal life.